Good afternoon, everybody. This is Justice with Jax, Season 3, Episode 4. Once again, we have a phenomenal human being for you. And once again, I'm here to remind you, today is Friday, June 20th, 2025, and that's 1 year, 10 months, 20 days, or 690 days that the case Armendariz versus City of Colorado Springs was filed and represented by the American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado. So I'm back with another episode to share some of what that journey is looking like and where we're at right now. But first, I want to pass the mic to my wonderful guest today and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Jax. Thanks for inviting me over here. My name is Adam Gillard. I am the chair of the El Paso County Progressive Veterans. And joining us also is my co-host on Left Face, Dick Wilkinson. We're going to set him up real quick here. Like always, Dick likes to show up a couple minutes late. You know, he's the talent,
Yeah.
so.
I have everything ready for me when I get there.
Yeah, I try. I'm sorry I don't have your water. I got one over here for you. So name's Adam Gillard, run the Progressive Veterans. We do a lot of, community activities around town, helping out, just wherever we can. You know, people reach out and we help. Got involved with 5051, doing a lot of the planning for protests and stuff downtown.
Thank you for that important work.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Like last weekend was such a good vibe downtown for having, 10 to 12,000 people.
Seriously,
It was, there was, one small incident, but everybody was just happy to be there. They were, dancing and happy just to be out doing something. So
joy is resistance. We talk about that on this show. So
yeah, not giving into the violent rhetoric is huge. You don't give them those wins by being a peaceful movement.
Right.
So it's been a whole lot of fun, a lot of great learning opportunities, meeting tons of great people. And then me and Dick do Left Face, giving a veteran's political perspective on the kind of what's going on in the world and kind of bringing it back to the local scene here. So,
well done. Well, do you want to take a beat to introduce yourself as well, Dick? Quickly?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for inviting us over to be guests on the show and do a crossover episode. My name's Dick Wilkinson, and I'm retired from the Army after 20 years. I retired back in 2019, and as soon as I retired, that was my opportunity to get into politics. I ran for state senate down in New Mexico, where I was stationed at the time when I retired, and had been in the community for about 5 years when I separated. So I decided that was going to be my long-term home for a while, so that would be where I did politics. Ran that race for a few months, backed out of it, didn't run it to the end, but that led me into a lot more engagement with the Veterans Caucus in New Mexico, and that really opened my eyes to how you can make traction happen at the state level and how that can still have real, genuine impact on military members and their families. So that's something I've been passionate about over the last few years, and it's really my focus for political work.
Glad to hear that. It sounds like another thing we talk about on this show is community building. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of layers to that, and there's lots of ways to do that. And it is super cool for this to be the first time I get to collab with another force doing the good work here in El Paso County by really bringing out local voices, local perspectives, and keeping it actually really relevant to current events so people stay knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially, when we have such should be national level huge topics like the folks that got kidnapped and that are still missing and our government officials are silent on, we talk about it pretty much every week. Mm-hmm. We try to keep them in the cycle because mm-hmm. it is absolutely tragic and horrific that it's already passed. Those 80 plus people just gone.
Yeah, and their family members are the only ones that understand the impact, and as we've talked about on our show, they're also some of the least well positioned to do anything about that impact.
The vulnerability of it,
yeah, they're vulnerable. And so you forget about the people who are missing, you forget about their family members that are impacted by that because they are marginalized, right? So
yeah.
Certainly, yeah. We had our Colorado Immigrants' Rights Coalition organizer on recently to talk even with more detail about that news item that you're mentioning, and more importantly, this human rights concern. Right. And that's just one example of kind of the scene in Colorado Springs, which is why I have this show, which is to keep focus on a civil rights case that the origin is Colorado Springs, right? And so that's the case where the ACLU is representing myself and the Chinook Center, who you all may have heard of because they're another organizing force for progressives here in Colorado Springs as a nonprofit. And so we're still waiting for an opinion from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. So hurry up and wait, as my friends from the military understand.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's a prominent feeling.
And this was like a violation of the search or
the arguments are really some First Amendment grounds, but prominently focus on the Fourth Amendment, which is the right to privacy.
Right.
And so what the key piece people should take away from that is there are really, really dangerous warrants that the police filed when they accused me of a crime of which I was never convicted. And these warrants are so egregious that were they allowed to stand as part of our law, we really would be endangering democracy and that right that we have to privacy, the fourth in the Bill of Rights. And like I said, it's connected to the First Amendment as well, because when I was accused, arrested, and then investigated, where they took all of my electronic devices with search warrants, we were in the midst of a housing justice protest. And so it was the protest activity. It was the story.
And this is during the big BLM movement too, right?
Actually, it was the summer after that.
The summer after, okay.
It was August 2021. So we're coming up on a few years here now. And so that's why one of the big things, because it involves the First Amendment for me, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to talk about this because clearly they're trying to oppress and make you be quiet, right? And what I've been dealing with lately is I really don't enjoy at all how the case is a foreshadowing of what has been going on.
Right. So as you're talking,
yeah.
I was thinking about just how they use this area as a test bed to do things like this, but like raid a nightclub and steal people.
Yes.
Illegally wiretap folks because the general population here is so pro police force and everything that they're blind to you need some restrictions and things like that.
Right, some balance. We're going to talk about that dynamic for sure, because it's something, like you said, I think is a part of the reputation of where we live, right? El Paso County, Colorado Springs, right?
Yeah, it's a test bed for folks to run these things to see what they can get away with, really.
And just like you did, because we're going to talk about the case you filed, but for better or for worse, we could dive in on another episode, but for better or for worse,
I think we're up to 6 episodes that we got to record now.
That's right, because there's so many rabbit holes you can go down.
Yeah, we just keep diving.
I love it. But you, in our democracy, identify that there's unfortunately an onus on the individual, right, to keep the government accountable at certain points. And so that's really what this case is about. And we have people or organizations who joined us on what is the amicus brief, right, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and just these incredible organizations, highly invested in safeguarding people's privacy in what is a growing surveillance state, right? Which now we're hearing about even more when we have law enforcement at the federal level straight up abducting people. And so
I'm so glad I'm oblivious to social media.
I've dialed it down substantially.
I'm off of almost everything. Yeah, I am as well. And I appreciate it. I agree. I got off of Facebook, 4 years ago, and talk about not looking back.
Yeah, Election Day 2024, the day after, that's when I was like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah.
Facebook, and that's the interesting part, and Adam and I were talking about this a little bit, is just all these platforms that are out there, and there are people who are stepping up, both trying to keep the government accountable, doing what we're doing, bringing voice to a lot of issues in our community. And so at this point, I think with our case, we are hoping that the context of the times just really underscores how important the ACLU's arguments are in this case.
Yeah.
And so there's just been so much going on, and I did want to take a beat, the spectrum of what I often call the chaos era, right, is that we've installed 2 recent political assassinations, and I wanted to make sure to say their names, right, which Melissa and Mark Hortman were assassinated in the state of Minnesota because Melissa was a state legislator, and State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were also shot and are in recovery. And so it is a lot to process these days, but we can't not talk about it, right?
Right. And I mean, that news came out right before we started our big protest.
The
downtown.
No Kings.
Yeah. And so, talking to the marshals beforehand, everybody's worried. You never know when the next one's going to be. And we saw it again in Salt Lake City.
In my mind, it put a real weird tone on like safety around the whole day,
Truly.
And not because I was personally like expecting to participate in anything, but just nationwide, I was like, man, talk about unease and like opportunity for copycat situations, or just confusion causes opportunity,
Confusion.
right?
Yeah.
And
That's
that was what I felt on Saturday morning. Was like, this is a chance for other people to do things inside this confusion, right?
And thankfully, this is why we have to do it, though, right? And I respect people who have the fear and push through it, and I would never diminish someone. Their opinion is, it's better for me to stay at home, right? Like,
Fair.
to each their
if you
own.
wake up to the news of
if you feel
a
that
gunned down politician, that might make you
might
want to stay home that day.
I understand that 100%.
And that's the point, right? And I also
the fear is the point.
The fear is the point. The chaos is the point. Another layer to it that I would love for you all to chime in on is that, especially with a veteran's perspective, this commander-in-chief is really using incredibly terrible ways as a form of distraction for their number of failures on, a substantive like policy work, right?
That's the other topic we talk about every week. And the feint, right? How are they showing us one hand but punching with the other, right? We talk about that every week.
And it's always projecting something. Right
and
now,
LA paid the price. Like, who else is going to pay the price?
And I guess the appeals court just gave Trump back control of the National Guard
with restrictions, right? Like I know the courts are going back and forth real hard on this one, like every few days.
Right.
But
I figured it'll make the Supreme Court eventually.
Yeah, I read the headline this morning that said controls back, like basically he can do what he wants, but I didn't get to read about the restrictions because it was just like on screen kind of headline.
But it's still horrific when you still have like the 700 active duty Marines or 700 was that the number that are there waiting, and Marines are good at their job, and their job is to shut their humanity off and get control of the situation.
So you could understand why people would be scared.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like just having them there, those are dogs waiting to attack right now. So
it's an escalation.
It's really scary. Yes, absolutely.
And it's a show of force against
our people,
citizens,
citizens, other Americans.
That's not what's
which
supposed
is
to happen.
horrifying.
And I know folks that are there too. And it's such a small area of what's going on there. Also, I always like to mention that it's such a small area. It's like one little corner intersection where they ordered
like about 2 blocks.
They ordered like cars to come up. They did the driverless car order, like a Uber type thing. So the driverless cars pulled up, and then that's when they lit them on fire, took their pictures and stuff like that.
In this media environment, all it takes is one photo, one GIF, and the way that it spreads like a virus, right?
Right.
And there's so many complicated layers to it because the political assassinations, the guy disguised himself as police officer. Oh my gosh, way to set that off, right?
Yeah.
And then
he went to different homes too.
He had a huge list, right? And then there's always going to be people criticizing the way law enforcement handled it too, right? And so then we're seeing all these Democratic political officials being accused of assault and arrested and stuff. And for me, that was part of my case is how the police came to obtain a search warrant in my house, that they accused me for 2nd-degree felony attempted aggravated assault because one of them charged the crowd, right? And I dropped my bike like, what the hell, you coming for me? And because it landed next to him, they were able to accuse me that I had lifted it up and thrown it and tried to assault him, which was never the case. And so thankfully I was ultimately never convicted of a crime, but that gave them the impetus to confiscate all my electronic devices, leave me in a total blackout, because that's what happens in today's world when you don't have devices, and leave me with the very direct message of sit down, shut up, little girl, you be quiet,
this is happening to you.
Shame on you.
This thing is happening. What you're afraid of, it's happening.
When I give you your phone back, you say thank you.
So
And
I have to offer this detail because it's relevant. I worked for the NSA for my entire career.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm a surveillance guy.
Let's talk about
so
it.
you
That's
know.
what this conversation is about.
He's like, I'm well aware of what you're talking about.
I was like, Sam, is that you? I call my FBI agent Sam. Or that's the joke on the internet, right?
Who's watching?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, who's watching?
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I just wanted to offer it. Because I don't find myself
some
in these
disclosure.
arguments. I don't find myself in these arguments anymore. I guess maybe I was cared about it more when I had the uniform on. I don't know.
Sure.
Or people aren't as tuned in on the topic as much anymore either.
Right.
But I get into a position of what's I'm sure is staunch defense, but it's defense based on my firsthand knowledge that the federal government specifically and then the intelligence community. Let me get even more specific. Not talking about the FBI. FBI is a member of the intelligence community, but it's man, they don't walk or talk like a duck.
Well, and that's domestic, right? There's
that's
the
what I'm
different
saying.
scopes.
Everyone else, if there's 18 members, 17 of them are externally focused. And then one of them can do stuff on the inside. So you know who we don't really play nice with on the 17 others? The FBI.
Yeah.
Because they have a
That's
totally
so
different
interesting.
set of rules, a totally different title authority.
Just perspective, where
And
they're
it's
looking at,
perspective, too, of, when I see a nail, I know what hammer to hit it with. They don't see the same nail or use the same hammer.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of... Wait. Why is the FBI asking about this, right? Like, that would be the initial response of, like, this is foreign intelligence. Why do they care about this, right? That's my first thing, is if I saw the FBI named in some list of emails or some, distribution list, I'd say, I don't produce things that they can consume. Why are they in this list, right? Like, and that's me defending, saying, even that far back, people like me, which is tens of thousands of people that are doing this type of surveillance, know, hey, I know what my boundaries are. I know what my right and left limits are, and I know what U.S. citizens are and what they're not. And not only do I know it, I have to prove that I know it every single year to maintain my clearance.
Right.
That I understand the difference between an American citizen, an American organization or U.S. entity, and whatever is everything else. I know the difference. And if I get information that crosses that line in either direction, I know exactly how to handle that, right? How to legally disclose that there was an accidental collection, how to destroy it, how to report that information got into the wrong database. Like, hey, this is only supposed to have foreign stuff, but I see some 719 phone numbers. That's huge red flag. I push the button and then I throw my hands up and say, stop, something bad happened. I'm just one of 10,000 people that know how to do that. Right. And so we understood the limits and the laws very carefully from a signals intelligence, surveillance, and using that equipment perspective. And we had the, genuine fear of God in us that you do it wrong, somebody will know. There's oversight on oversight.
Right.
And even if you think you've turned this on and you've done your little sneaky stuff and then you turned it off and you're being shady, no, someone knows.
That's fascinating. Well, and you might appreciate this. That insight is so valuable because one of the arguments, of course, there's, a whole set that the ACLU is making, but one of them is that the FBI has been saying they want to keep the entire digital fingerprint of my life that they confiscated because they took all my electronics, right? Even my hard drive with emo music from high school, right? Yes, they found every single one that they could and made a copy. And so now they're saying the ACLU is arguing that I was never convicted of a crime, so why are you retaining that? You need to destroy that or return that.
Return it because I have 10 laptops from my lifetime that I need to pull stuff off of. If I get the FBI to do that for me, then give it to me in a thumb drive. Be like,
that's some taxpayer use of funds
that
is a positive.
Nice and lined out.
They're great at records
alphabetical
management.
files by date.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Oh, come on,
I'm with you on that. Well, that's a good point. Maybe I can. I'll talk to I'll jot that down. Well, and that's why I was really enjoying having you all on the show as part of, I wanted to talk about your podcast too, with this perspective that you offer. It's important. I mean, I don't know if you identify, right, it's progressive veterans, because that's one of your links, right?
Yeah.
It's so don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's amazing because that's a viewpoint for residents here where we have 5 different military installations in this county. So that's going to be a relevant viewpoint to our community. So I think, could you tell people a little bit about, the origin story of the when and how Left Face came about?
So I ended up getting into nonprofit work and taking over Progressive Vets in like 23, I think. And shortly after, I think you came in and we kind of met and just talked and kind of went separate ways. And then I kind of stumbled around, did some other things with the Progressive Vets. I had a campaign for CD5 there. Had to put the podcast kind of on hold during that time. Just you know how much time it takes to do these things.
I do. Technically, I'm doing the opposite for now.
Right.
Running a campaign and a podcast. Yeah.
It's crazy how easy it is to do it, but it is time consuming, especially when you're learning. So like I had to put it all kind of on the side while I did the campaigning, and we did a lot as the Progressive Vets during the campaign to get signs out and have events around town and lobby for the cannabis initiatives that we were a part of and things like that. So my old podcast just kind of fell off, and it was, I needed to get it going again for the group and keep the community educated. But I didn't want to do one where it's just like an infomercial for somebody. Like I loved having guests on and talking about what they were doing in their books and things like that. But at the end of the day, I really want to like just educate our community. And kind of randomly, Dick reached out and we started talking again. And he has like I'm pretty progressive. Like I've hugged at least 3 trees today. Okay, so
today,
so far,
he's not done. He's
I'm
not
not done. So I'm a pretty progressive guy, and Dick does a good job of kind of putting a different perspective on myself, because I don't like being in my own echo chamber either and just kind of hearing my own opinion.
Same.
So he kind of gives me a different perspective on things, being more of like a Polish Democrat, libertarian, still very much, capitalist free market, but cares about people, so, yeah, but when you reached out, we started doing it, and it's we've been kind of rocking and rolling with it since then.
Yeah, I mean, I met Adam when he was running his campaign, and I felt the first time I met him, I said, "Man, why are you running against this like stalwart forever Republican man? Like, I feel bad that
Texas is Lamborn at the time.
I commiserated.
Right.
I was like, oh, that sounds terrible, know. Yeah. And then I walked away from that meeting, and I was like, I just like pissed on his shoes, and I feel bad. Like, I took the wind out of his sails.
Candidates are used to that, I think.
And I don't even know him though, right? We're not close enough for me to go, this is a terrible idea, But I was like, why
I felt so pretty, and he's just you ugly son of a.
And so then after that, I was like, I need to stay in touch with him, not just because I want to apologize, but because I thought about it more, and I said, you know what? I want to stick close to somebody who says, I don't care if he's got 10 terms under his belt. I'm going to take a run at it anyway, because my ideas are so different than his that I want people to hear my ideas. And if they like them, then we got something to work with. And I said, you know what? That's my same mode as far as politics goes.
Yep.
And so I want to work on whatever Adam's working on. So here we are.
Yeah. That's great. I can appreciate that. We've talked about that on this show too, is that there is a value again in raising the information, raising your voice, communicating with people, because when you're campaigning, I think if you're doing it the right way, you're community building as well, and you're connecting, right? Yeah. That's how your show came about.
And the goodness of any kind of grassroots movement comes in, one, getting your candidate elected, but then two, the network of people that gets, I'll say, left behind, if you will, right, from that grassroots effort. So you get groups like, I'm sure, Indivisible and 5051 are both groups that, if you look back far enough in their history, it was some other candidates program or a nonprofit that was like investing in a candidate and promoting them, and then it turned into it caught fire and turned into something else. So most of the really impactful social programs oftentimes are started from those type of, like, we got, like you say, community rally, and then if the momentum's there, and then the effort stays, right? So
one thing that I've really appreciated coming from active duty, or I was a reservist on AGR order, so I was active duty, but coming from that community and back into like civilian life is how all this stuff has always been going on, and and the people like in the community are so dedicated and have put so much time and effort and just themselves into building these things. Now that I'm able to kind of like be a part of that, it's just wild to me to be surrounded by people who kind of think like me and like just want to hug trees sometimes.
I agree completely on the whole, like, as we are legally bound to not participate in politics, right? That we knew what it was, right? We knew what the impact was. We understood how it impacted our own lives. Yeah. But it's like, I grew up watching the Dallas Cowboys. It's like when I joined the Army, if they said you can never watch a Cowboys game again until you retire,
right?
You know, you can't go to the stadium, you can't watch the TV. Yeah. Right. You just know football exists, right? Yeah. And 20 years from now, you get to watch a Cowboys game, and then you'll find out all about the players and all the games they won and lost, and you'll get the whole download and you'll find out about all of it. But that's 20 years from now. Between now and then, don't worry about football. It doesn't exist.
And like our ballots, like my ballot. My local information was for Arizona because there was no taxes, right? So like I was voting for Mark Kelly, so I didn't care about this area at all.
Same.
You know, so like you just don't get involved with local stuff really.
Yeah, it's a discourage or detracting.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, unfortunate.
Which is, I now that I was talking about wanting to do veterans initiatives, as I'm now can watch the Cowboys again, right? I want to play the game, right? I want to wear the shirt and I want to tell people about it, right? But I also want to be able to go get these military family members, especially maybe not the active duty person themselves, but the family members. I want them to not fall into that trap of,
100%.
Well, I don't live in this county, like really.
Yeah.
Because
yes,
it's going to affect
You're here for 3 years.
Yeah.
Your kids are here in school, aren't they?
Yeah.
Right? You know?
So, if you register to vote here, you could run for school board.
Are you going to buy a house here?
You could run for school board and help your kids.
Any of those things, right? So whether they're, just any level of engagement or even just thinking about voting or blow your mind, register to vote where you live. That's crazy. So you don't have to register to vote back from wherever
every time I talk to a representative, and Democrats aren't a fan of handing back tax money, but I harp on that, like we need to get rid of that state income tax for active duty folks, because especially in this area where we got so much Air Force, Space Force, they're a lot more progressive than the Army folks. So I think it would be a net positive, like at the voting station for Democrats if they did that. We would lose some tax revenue, but I don't think a whole lot in the bigger picture. But I try to push that every time. And
that's a good point, because there are so many nuances, right, to active duty military life that people don't even know about, right? Because the military itself is what percentage of our country?
It's usually less than 1%.
Less than 1%, and then
that
like
part,
7% is veterans.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thankfully got a unique perspective myself, being in Senator Michael Bennett's office and being the military and veterans constituent advocate for a while. And so that was fascinating to me because, like you said, Adam, I would observe differences among maybe the branches and this, what I would say something I really respect, this commitment to being, I guess objective is the word, to not engaging, because like you said, they know the commitment they made.
Right.
And yet, there are some instances where you're active duty and you may need to go to your congressional representative's office for a reason, right?
Like maybe your wife is an immigrant
and
they're
I will say
to deport
this,
her.
Right, so I will say this. I had to go to Lamborn's office a couple times, and his staffers helped us every time. Like the staffers that work in the offices, especially when we bring military issues, they always bend over backwards to help us out. It was usually pay issues and things like that. And it's amazing how a phone call from a congressional office
that blew my mind witnessing that. Yeah,
it's like on the caller ID, and like it just starts flowing. Like information starts flowing.
Or the senator's letterhead. I was working with a veteran who, for some reason, they were trying to claw back some money from her, and it hinged on her marital status, and then the government wanted her to prove that she had never been married, which obviously makes no sense. And all I had to do was write it just like that. You're asking her to prove a negative on the senator's letterhead, and within that 24-hour period, I think even, she was back on track, and that was both chilling but also reaffirming in that, okay,
Right.
like who you elect matters because
does,
they're
yeah.
supposed to serve you. And that
Absolutely.
includes constituent services,
Yeah.
casework, especially at the federal level.
Yeah, that should be a huge thing for anybody
You
that's
know?
running for office here. Is always talk about
Yeah.
casework management, because you're going to have a lot of constituents. So like 7% we say are veterans, but here in our community it's 15%.
There you go.
So
yeah.
like we're even high for the state of Colorado, because
Yep.
Colorado kind of falls along the national average. But yeah, we have a huge contingency here that should have a lot more input into this community, because you're a quarter of the community.
But
Right.
there's that mental vacuum of like, I don't do politics. So, I mean, and me and Adam I'm not because we're Democrats or progressive or anything, but we're the exception as far as veterans that find the chance to, watch Cowboys again, and they say, man, I haven't watched them in 20
Yeah.
years. I don't know who any of the team
I'm not
members
that
are.
interested
They don't
anymore.
care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. I got my farm, or I
Yeah.
finally got the house that I wanted to buy out in the mountains,
Yeah.
and like I'm far enough away that the last
Right.
thing I care about is who's in office, right?
Yeah.
And that's pervasive here,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So you have people who move here and don't feel ownership over the community. You have people who stay here and aren't interested in politics, but yet they're impacted by all of these things.
For sure.
And it's a higher percentage of that kind of, I don't want to say checked out, but encouraged to not participate almost, right?
Well,
For a
yeah.
variety of cultural reasons. But there's a big piece of that population here.
Yeah.
So it's a for folks like me and Adam, it makes our work harder because we got to motivate more people to pay attention and say this impacts you.
Yeah.
And then the mentality is like, no, like I'm from Tennessee. But you're going to live here for 10 years,
Right.
like after you retire, you're going to be here for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah,
And they're
you're
like,
in.
yeah, but I'm
You're
going
in.
to go back to the home town, and so they're just
definitely
checked
heard
out. And so it's
Yeah.
hard, and not in a
Yeah.
bad way. That's fine. I was the same, but now I want to grab people by their
People
uniform
need to wake
collar
up.
and go,
Yeah.
We need
listen,
you."
man.
Yeah, we need you all right now. We need everybody.
Yeah, everybody on deck, absolutely, in this chaos era. And can I ask, because I was listening, one thing I wanted to touch on for sure was, and I think you've had an episode on it, but there's a lot of intersections with veterans issues, and one of them is cannabis. And this community is so uniquely positioned in
Yeah.
that conversation.
Right.
And so, Adam, can you give people an idea of the case that you were involved in, and like, I forget which court it was, but can you kind of give us a summary too of like the outcome, because that was an important moment in Colorado Springs.
Yeah. So, I mean, cannabis has been legal in Colorado since like 2012. Okay. So that's millions of dollars a year that we've just said no to, folks living here, and just
The tax revenue, yeah.
Yeah. And so, when we have conversations about, police department lacking, bodies and training facilities, and roads are falling apart, like all this stuff should have been solved already. Right. When you look at cannabis from a veteran's perspective, you can look at it, three different ways. That mindset of it's makes sense to get money from this stuff that's here, and everybody else around us is making money. But then there's also that perspective of it helps people. People that have gone through some of the things that veterans go through, and you don't have to be at war to suffer, trauma and get PTSD in the military. There's a lot of different roads to that,
Right.
and there's a lot of complex cases, and having to deal with those things through medications and getting kind of like numbed by all those things. Cannabis just offers you another way to unlock yourself and untie yourself. But it's hard to sit down with somebody and say, I need help. I can't do this, So having a recreational option for people to try it and like having an experience that, because when you go into these places now too, like they're so educated, and like they're really smart when you walk into these stores.
The science has been allowed to advance.
Right. So, you say like, hey, I'm dealing with anxiety. I need help. This is what you want. This is what you don't want. And more importantly, like this is the ones that you don't want. Right. So you can go in there and you can get that help, and you can say like, yeah, this does help me. And then you can, if you want to get the medical card, or if you want to stay off it, because, one thing with getting a medical card is then you can't conceal carry. And that's a big thing in the veteran community. It's one of those things that is ridiculous to me that people can go buy a fifth of alcohol every day and still conceal carry.
It seems hypocritical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the beginning, Progressive Vets, we one of our board members signed the petition to get it rolling to begin with. We collected signatures. We were big on getting legal cannabis recognized here in the city or recreational in the city. And at the same time, city council here, who's always got this, 7-2 supermajority and just kind of tries to enforce their will on everything, to include the Carmen line that just got...
Which is not representative of the people, which is why Carmen line just failed miserably.
Horrifically.
Yeah.
80%.
I didn't know what happened.
It was like
there.
80%, like 82%
Yeah.
said
I think
no.
I drove through that area yesterday,
Yeah.
and I was like, "This is where they were talking about."
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that went to a ballot was because the city council voted 7-2 to
And people
annex it.
organized.
And people,
brilliant.
people got the petitions and they signed it and they stopped that because we can't withhold the people that we have now. Let's focus on like our own infrastructure.
There's so many concerns.
Yeah. But so again, the city council, for the cannabis
Going against
issue,
the people's will.
Yeah. They tried to confuse people on the ballot, so they put another one on there. Voted 7-2 to say,
Right.
no, let's change the city charter. So if we change the city charter, then if theirs does pass, we can still outlaw it. And at the same time, they tried to do that mile offset.
The ordinance.
So
that
like
was
it
a
couldn't-
zoning.
Yeah, it couldn't be within a mile of a school or hospital, crosswalk.
Which is nowhere in the city.
Nowhere in the city.
Yeah.
There's like a place up in Rock Rimmon, I think that could have been viable.
Possible.
But so they keep trying to push these things. When the voters voted, they lost twice. Like they said, yes, we want legal cannabis. No, do not change that city charter.
Right.
That was confusing for the city council. So they went back to the,
That was their legal argument.
yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
we get what we paid for.
That was exactly. That was literally Dave Donaldson's argument. Was we were confused. They would confuse the voters. Well, one,
Right.
we told you were going to confuse the voters. We told you.
Yeah.
But I saw 3,000 ballots because I was part of the election commission that did the recount and everything. So like I saw a lot of ballots, and like it didn't matter if it was a Republican-led ballot or a Democrat-led ballot. Like there was it was clear what people were voting on. But they tried to put a measure forward for an April vote, to repeal it.
Which costs more money because you
Costs more
print the
money.
ballots, you mail them, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it was like $500,000 to $1 million was the estimate for
Wow.
what it would cost
Yeah.
to do that. Again, while turning down tax money that people want to spend in this city. So they tried to get that onto the ballot, and that's where legislators back in 2012, I don't know who it was that put this little amendment in there, but it said if you're going to try to do any kind of local repeal, it needs to happen during a big election, during a general election.
Interesting.
Because we know who votes in April. We know who votes in April, and it's a historically low turnout all the time. I think this last April was still
That would have been my
horrifically low.
bigger complaint about spending $1 million
Yeah.
is that you get a 9% ballot return.
Right.
So
Yeah.
You know that 91% of your
Just-
votes is
Absolute
trash.
waste. Absolute
Literally,
waste.
the ballot went
Yeah.
into the trash as paper. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a newsletter that I sent out, and I was mouthing off about what city council was doing, and the cannabis council reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of their lawsuit because that little amendment really just kind of saved the day right there.
Yeah.
Whatever staffer lawmaker threw that in there,
What
12, 13
foresight.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And so we took it. I can't remember which district it was that we went to court.
Fourth.
Was it the fourth?
The fourth judicial here?
Yeah, that sounds right. But they kind of saw through it, and it's so clear that like it was clear. So the first time we sat down, she said, "Okay, I'm going to think about this." And on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was, she released her ruling, and it was this is obviously a repeal because the city was trying to say no, it's a clarification. They were trying to play that word judo stuff. So
I have a comment. I want to save it for the end, but I have a comment about that day in the court there. So
and then so the Colorado Supreme Court looked at it and decided not to pick it up because again it's pretty clear.
Straightforward.
So, and then it took a few days, and Donaldson finally said that they would cede, but they are trying it again.
Wow.
Like they're going to go after it again. They've already said it in there because this next
What a
city
waste.
council is going to be just as bad of a train wreck as the last one.
Unfortunately.
It's still 7-2.
We don't have what we need.
No. We can talk a lot about that too. But yeah, so they're going to keep trying it. Like now, all we have to do, I say in air quotes, because this is a super easy task, is hold the cannabis industry accountable for that tax revenue and make sure that it's going to where they say it's going to be going, and make sure that the people that are getting it are effectively using it in our communities.
Because it was allocated, like the way it was written, some of it is allocated towards the service of mental health services for veterans?
Vets with PTSD, homelessness, and just a general safety bucket. So there should be money flowing into those for people to start, receiving benefits from these things. And that's what's so frustrating is that, we could have been building these support services for the last 10, 12 years, with all this tax revenue. But instead we're going to try and play catch up when, we're a huge city now, or, exponentially larger, of a problem.
And that'll only continue. Yeah. Well, hear me out here. Oh, did you have your comment?
It's a fun
There we do
anecdote,
it.
actually. That so I came to the court first hearing the first day when the judge was hearing the case, and everybody was making their primary arguments, which is really the only time there was like a hearing in the courtroom. And I don't know the gentleman's name, so I couldn't give it if I tried. But the lawyer who was representing the city, I've seen oral arguments before, and I feel like somebody handed him a stack of papers he had never read before, and they said, go up to the fourth floor and defend this case. And he was like, sure, okay. And someone made up an argument, and someone who was not a lawyer had over their lunchtime made up some arguments, right? And was like, hey, at 1 o'clock, have the lawyer say this stuff. And so he walked in there and was like, here's what my clients, care about. And it was just the most half-baked court performance, and I can't be mad at the lawyer because you could tell he had no genuine concern about the topic. He had no interest in what he was reading. He had no care about what the city was asking him to do.
It's like embarrassing.
It was. And he was just standing there like, so there you go, Your Honor. and even then it was just, you just saw like he looked dejected.
I mean,
this is stupid.
It was such a clear written law. Like I don't know.
Well, and mainly they asked him to go in there and say, ask her if she's willing to get confused over this word or that word.
Yes.
Wow.
Right? And please go ask the judge if the semantics here matters, right?
Yeah.
And so he went in there and made a case on semantics, and nobody in the room, it was so hollow.
No one was buying it.
Nobody would buy it, right?
Yeah.
And then he had to leave and shove those papers and go do his real job, So it was a bad day for the city as far as showing up just totally
just another waste of taxpayer money, really.
And it was it was proof that
it.
They believed that simply pulling the string was going to get them the result that they wanted, right? They really genuinely believed, we'll put it on the ballot, nobody's going to fight this, there's no problem, nobody cares. We're just going to slide this in and do what we always do. And they believed that. And that's why when the lawyer actually had to go to the courtroom, they're like, well, that's not what's supposed to happen. Wait, we pulled the cord. Why isn't the candy falling out of the pinata?
Well, that's why I wanted to take a moment to talk about this case because, kudos, respect. It took someone making sure to test the system and, justice, you could say, was delivered in this instance by enforcing the law that already existed.
Right? Yeah, law and order. Look at that.
And I think that as I'm listening, one of the things it kind of smacks of, because I've had the opportunity to watch the city argue in my case, right? And we did that in the Court of Appeals in May. And one of the takeaways, my dad, my number one guy, was with me. And as a taxpayer watching, right, this city argue, so his thoughts were even worse than embarrassment is just the, do you really believe that? Because some of the arguments they were making were really, you could say, the antithesis of, respecting people's civil rights, honoring the Colorado Constitution as a city just jurisdiction.
Ethical. How do you go to sleep at night just trying to dance around? So just
because
you can legally do it,
we talk about that is we live in a society where it's just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And that's when the ethics and the morals and integrity, that all ideally comes into play.
Right. I think the culture that we live in politically right now is if you can do it, you should.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's what we're...
And that was, the Supreme Court telling the president that everything you do is basically legal because you have some way to contort it to say it's official duties. And we're not going to question that. Well, that's it. That is the permission to say, if you think you can get away with it, give it a shot. See what happens.
So I saw a funny TikTok, because this is a cultural wide thing. But I saw a funny TikTok thing this morning where this kid wanted to get away with something in a locker room, and he grabbed a hat off of like this big buff like dude, and the dude's like, "Give me my hat back." And he said it like 2 or 3 times, and he reaches and slaps the snot out of this kid, and the kid's like, actually, and he just like reset his brain, and it's like, yeah, man, that actually happened.
There are consequences.
People have forgotten that, like, in the rest of the world here, if you take something from somebody, you get slapped.
Well, and I would say even a certain segment of people, which is what's really bothering like our society at large, right, is that there's a hypocrisy of the way the rules are even enforced, right? So
there is.
So let me say this, though. I would love to hear your thoughts on, we talked about 2 of these political moments that I argue there's a pattern emerging. One, we talked about the passage of rec cannabis here. We talked about the failure of the Carmen Line annexation. And then in fall 2023, the 2A for the police academy, more money there, failed. And then we also flipped HD 16 with Stephanie Vigil. Yeah. And then that spring, we elected Mayor Yemi Mobolade, right? Which it was a big deal because he's the first Black man voters elected.
Yeah.
And then he's actually from Africa and became naturalized in 2017. Yeah. So with all of that, and definitely with your perspective as veterans, do you think we're having a moment? Is there a pattern emerging here in El Paso County? And I would like to believe, yes, that the reputation is changing. We know that everyone thinks we're a big red county.
So first, I'd be remiss if I didn't. Mayor Mobolade, I don't think is
I was going to say,
Democratic.
Yemi's a Republican, homie.
He's
not, a pastor.
So like what he sold to Dems and Independents was a shell. Not a fan.
Well,
he
there's
will not
identity
receive
politics.
my vote again.
There's identity politics, and there was clearly some votes on the table where you can just go, hey, you want to play some identity politics? Right. And I don't know about his performance so much. I don't care, but there may have been a ruse that was very easy to get some votes. With.
I've read some articles from people that followed him around from his because he did the thing with the city council where he kind of went around to each area of the city.
Yes, Nick Raven's city council town hall coverage.
Okay,
right. Was that what you were reading?
So the one that I read, it just mentioned how like everywhere he went, you could tell he was just playing the crowd, and he was just an empty shell, just pleasing people. That's all he knows how to do is just try to please the person in front of him.
And mayors are not, don't have a party affiliation, so that's why they behave that way. Is they're more glad handy in more places because they don't have a party affiliation to stand behind them and go, well, if they hate me, at least I got these people behind me. You don't have that as a nonpartisan elected official.
But so with that aside, overall, I think the protests alone show us how much this area is changing. When we started out a couple months ago, we had a couple hundred people downtown, and then the next one we were kind of planning for a couple hundred people again, and like 3,000 showed up, and it was huge. And people were so anxious and eager to get out and like use their voice. And after we did that big one, I mean, this last one, 10 to 12,000. There's a great video of that tank going by Trump. That's squeaking on the internet.
Yeah.
I can tell you, like, from a few hours before that happened, it is so loud when you're surrounded by that many people and that much traffic. I could not hear anything on our radios. Like, and then to watch his parade and hear that tank go squeaking by.
It'll live on in infamy forever.
Yeah. It was just so funny to juxtapose those two situations.
Truly, and that was the point, which I was proud.
And it was such a positive, like, happy community. The one bad incident I do want to talk about, because we haven't gotten much police support on this. They took the report, but we haven't really gotten any traction. And we have good video and pictures of this guy. Guy comes into our area, later discovered to be concealed carrying, or or it might have been an open carry because it was. I could see it. When you conceal carry, you should never see the gun.
Right.
But there was a situation where the fire department got called. It was really hot. Only one serious situation where the folks got some good attention, and we had plenty of medics there on site to help people out. But a guy ran up to the fire department personnel and reported a bomb threat.
Oh, geez.
And our like head chanter, like one of our best marshals, was like, "Hey, where is it? Tell me where it is." And the guy started running. So when we train marshals, we train de-escalation. Like, you don't chase after people, right? and he made the right decision to go against training. And he followed the guy, and he, because like at that point in time, like you don't know if you have a Boston City Marathon bombing type of situation or something, and now this guy says, "Hey, there's a bomb," and then takes off running.
Right.
He's like, I couldn't just let him go, so he runs in front of him and gets pretty good, and he had a body cam on him, and he gets a good picture of him and things like that. But then the guy turns around and assaults somebody else, kind of punching, trying to get out of the way. Because another big thing with de-escalation training is you never corner an agitator. Always make sure that they have a means to escape. And so like once he got the video and the picture of the guy, at least, then he backed off. He didn't further engage. But yeah, then it comes out that the guy was carrying a gun. We got a picture of him punching one of the counter protest, or one of our protesters. He was a counter protester.
Oh really? Did he have like any affiliation that he was wearing or anything?
Nope. Looked like a standard guy working in Building 2 on Peterson. Just older white gentleman, screaming and angry. And we gave all the information, and I will say that day working with the cops was really like pretty seamless on my end. They would have liked more information, like quicker from me, on some situations, but as far as them like responding to things, like they did great. We got the report in, whether it goes anywhere or whatnot, but the day of, we had motorcycle cops helping out with situations and coming off and saying hey, thanks for helping us out, and like because we do like it was an extremely positive, just pleasure experience, other than that one instance. So like everybody was so extremely happy with it.
I know, I was glad to be there.
And so to be a part of something like that in a community that is labeled as red,
exactly,
and we just got probably 2% of the population to come out and say nope, we're not. And that's the 2%. They always talk about that 3.5%, and hopefully we'll get there later this summer for the locality area, because we did it on the national scale. We got to 3.5%, but hopefully we can do it here. And that's just the people that feel motivated to go out that day, on a day that there was political assassinations.
Seriously.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the people that still showed up. So when I think about this community and how this community is turning, I think we could flip things a lot faster than what people were projecting to begin with.
You heard it here. I'm saying it. You're saying it. I don't know if we have a unanimous.
I have an anecdote. It was the air show that happened last summer, so it's almost a year now. But the Progressive Veterans and a couple other groups of the El Paso County Democrats set up a tent together out at the flight show. And what I saw there, we had expected that there would be people who are just like totally disinterested. Then you're going to have some people that are like, you're a traitor. Like, how can you be a veteran and not be a gun-toting Republican, right? And then here's the thing that we didn't know how this would happen. How many people would slide by the table and secretly mumble under their breath, "Thanks for being a Democrat," and then walk away, because whoever they were with would have, why are you talking to those crazy liberals? But we had a lot of that, people walking up and going, I had no idea.
That.
Like, what do you mean there's veterans around here that are Democrats?
Right.
And they were surprised. Hopefully some of those people have come to some of the protests at this point.
Yeah, they have. And it's the same type of vibe, though. People are happy to be there and happy to be speaking up. And right next to that tent on the flight line was Lamborn's tent with his two reps, because he didn't never show up for anything. But he had his two representatives just sitting there quietly all day, while our tent had people coming up and engaging with us and just excited to have like an option to talk.
So it was a lot of the whispering under the breath and sort of like, don't tell anybody, but I'm down for the cause.
That's what's up. I'm really glad to hear that.
So I've been making a joke about the Jesus fish, like how that came about, where like way back in the day, like one person would draw half of it and then the other person would draw the other half, and that person was a Christian. I think like we need to make the taco, like a chicken taco, be the thing. So like if I sit down next to a bar and I draw a taco and you draw a chicken, I know we can talk.
I like that. We can start testing that out. Definitely. That's hilarious. Well, good. I love the levity here, because here at the show we try to have a balance, because we're talking about reality, which is not lighthearted a lot of the time. But usually we wrap up the show, and I'd love to hear from the both of you what's good in your life and any calls to action that you have. There's a lot of action going on, but we like to put in that attitude of gratitude and keep it a little positive towards the end.
Man, I think the most positive thing going on in my life is just the people that I'm working with to put these things on and do things together. Like I said, it's so incredible to be in a community that cares, right? And we're not doing anything for ourselves or our own recognition. We're just trying to give people a platform to have something to say that they did that day, right? And like, because it sucks when you're just reading the news and you're just getting bombarded with stuff. Being out in the sun amongst people just yelling is therapeutic, right? Giving people
No doubt about it.
Giving people that platform, because this is a highly stressed like community, you know, just in general, just for the work that goes on around here and just life in general. So being able to work with a team that knows how to put these things together and really, you know, take your lane, run in it, and just get these things done and build a platform. It's just so much fun. And the call to action is just to keep coming out and make sure you're bringing a friend every time and they're bringing a friend every time.
Website, Facebook, what can you give the people?
So there's a 5051 has, like I said, I'm terrible at socials. like I know we have like an at 50, we have Colorado Springs at 5051 or 5051 COS.
Okay.
And then we have a Facebook that's out there too. So yeah, if you just Google 5051 Colorado Springs, you'll see all of our stuff, and they've done a ton of work on it. We've got like quite a few followers on like Blue Sky and things like that. So yeah, it's all out there. So that's probably the best thing that's really kind of happened in the last month or so for me. Is just meeting these people. Community
building.
Yeah,
I believe
so
we
fun.
can find healing in it.
Oh,
I really
so fun.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't really dive into the news much anymore because I just don't have time. But I feel like I'm doing something and helping the cause, you know.
Yeah,
so,
it's like where are you going to put your energy?
Yeah. So
I respect that. How about you?
One positive kind of reflection of something going on in the community. So I volunteer at the Veterans Trauma Court, which is why I knew that it was a 4th Judicial District, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm encouraged to see that lately there's been an increase in volunteers in that program, quite a significant increase in volunteers. And so, you know, I see that as I think a lot of people, regardless of political affiliation, do feel some distress in our culture and in our community right now and want to do something to contribute. And so I see that reflection in the volunteer programs that I'm involved with. Those, you know, people are showing up to help and help the community that they feel like they're a part of, right? So that's a positive.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
Definitely.
That's a positive thing I see happening. And kind of a parting message I would say is it's kind of specific, but for law enforcement and for military folks, you know, and for anybody really that's given some level of government authority to exercise their duties, let's all remember what lawful orders are. Let's all remember where you know inside of you if you are doing something that's within the scope of your duties or if you're doing something that is not what you signed up for. Yeah. And that can take a different kind of flavor depending on what type of uniform you're wearing. If you're a sheriff or a local police officer versus a military member, those things are defined differently. But that's a few million American citizens that have some a lot of opportunities, not just one, but a lot of opportunities to make the right choice. Right. And almost always they do. But we're in a culture right now where sometimes making poor choices is not punished. There's no consequences. Right. It may be encouraged. Right. It may be go along to get along. And if you're the guy that sticks out, you're going to be the wrong person in the police force or in the unit. And then your family suffers. I want to encourage that person that if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, because I mean,
when you pay a price for that, it's okay. Yeah. Right? Like we need that. We need somebody to, I don't want you to suffer, but I also definitely don't want you to carry the moral baggage of doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. There's that. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, once you know that one of the legs of our system is being kicked out and I'm talking, no due process, that the law is not being followed and, the judicial system is just being, ignored and just kind of put down. Once you know that that's happening, there's no longer an excuse if I'm just doing my job.
You have an obligation.
You have an obligation to come back onto your. You're back to being the community protector, and you need to protect us from this stuff. And that, I mean. Yeah, well, I don't even go down.
That's a whole
I got
other
another
podcast
thing for you right there.
Yeah.
But that's my parting words is that there's a few million people in the United States with some government authority, and we're moving into a culture where I just hope that they can exercise it with clarity and moral, moral
go to
compass
sleep at night well.
in check.
Absolutely. Integrity, ethics, they're key.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so well said, because really, and this is one thing I love about, I'm striving to be a public servant and asking people to trust me, like with their vote. And when I think we often don't necessarily reflect as much as like we're out of many one, like the many part is really important to our democracy. And so there are many people out there, like you said, that can continue to make the right choice. And you might have to have the courage to face some consequences. And I've been there. You got to take a few L's on your way to the wins, man.
I mean,
so
as a leader, your wins become a lot fewer in between a lot of losses. But
and
to be a leader, you have
has
to take
no
it.
shortage of examples of the one person who said,
No.
I think this is wrong. And I feel like we're in cultural crisis type mode where that day is going to come where that one person has to say this is wrong, and we don't know. Like, you
It's
never
been
know when that's going to
coming.
happen until afterwards, and then you get to see it and go, that was it. And somebody that might hear this might be that person.
Because I don't think it's going to be an elected official.
No.
Because
Can
I
I
think the
just
elected
offer-
officials are manufacturing too much of their
I completely agree.
social
Yeah,
stuff
there's
right
a
now.
degree
Yeah,
of that.
I
I'm
think
going to
it's-
shout out the Dodgers. When you talk about that,
that's cool.
that makes me think of the
Yeah.
LA
Yeah.
Dodgers
Yeah,
saying,
kicking them
hell
out.
no,
Yeah.
you can't use
and
our
then,
facilities.
and then ICE was like, no, we weren't there, and they're like, we got video.
What do you mean?
So
So
what
that's
about you?
what we're talking about.
What about you? Something positive that's going on?
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. I think my job is amazing. I have the privilege of sitting with so many amazing people, willing to share time with me, whether that's at work or community work. I love my little kitten. Her name is Justicia, or Justice. And I'm taking some time off to spend a trip with my best friend
Right on.
coming up. So
That's so important.
life is
Yeah,
good.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
And I feel so weird saying that because it is the chaos time, but I'm just trying to strive to find a balance in it because, running a political campaign will absolutely kick your ass. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that is always going on in the background, and it is both fantastic and really challenging.
Yeah.
So the balance there again.
Yeah, and the first thing that always goes is your sleep. So
I'm trying to rest is revolutionary.
So
That's
taking
where-
time to actually do things for yourself will actually help you sleep better. Will give you time to just focus. So you'll stay healthy. That's good that you take
I'm
the
trying
time
to
for
stay
yourself.
healthy.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me as a leader too, because
It's easy to
ideally it's easy to slip, but ideally if you're healthy as a leader, you are able to contribute and support others because
Well, you can't tell you're next in line to take a day off if you're not taking a day off. They wanted to be there with
Model
you and
that
helping you.
behavior for your people,
model
too.
the behavior for your people.
Definitely.
Yeah. So great job.
All right. Well, thank you, friends. So I'm going to close out. Episodes of Justice with Jax are recorded as a member of the Studio 809 podcast collective at the Next Us community co-working space in downtown Colorado Springs. So remember to ask yourself 2 questions. Who's telling your story, and how are you being the change you want to see in the world today? This is Justice with Jax, signing off.